Welcome to Seasons Podcast. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Doug.
And we are so excited about a new season where we're going to explore the idea of influence. We are going to talk with people like Dr. Valerie Wanza today about what influences have been in our lives, what impact they've had, but also outside influences and how they can impact who we are today, what influence we want to have on the world. So we're starting with Dr. Wanza here. Thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
I'm so excited to have you because what you guys may not know is that Dr. Wanza and Doug both worked in the Broward School District together for a little while. And so it's a really great opportunity we have to learn a little bit more about what Doug was like when he was a teacher. Give us everything you've got. Just joking.
All the dirt. Give us all the dirt.
But Doug, because you know Dr. Wanza well, I want you to do the introduction and then get us started on how you guys ended up working together.
Yeah, when I think of the word leadership, I think of the word influence. And when I think of the word influence, I think of you. Because for 32 years, you've consistently been a leader in Broward County Schools. And that's not typical for most people to stay that long and to still have a vibrant expression of what their faith is and how they lead. And right now you're the deputy superintendent of Broward Schools, and you have a lot of influence and you carry it so well. So let's just start with how you got started in education. How did you get your first chance and who helped influence that decision?
So it's interesting. Most people will say, you know, when I was growing up, I wanted to be. Well, I knew in third grade I wanted to be a teacher.
Oh, wow.
Really?
From third grade, I had an amazing third grade teacher talk about influence. Her name is Barbara Schaefer. And at that time, I actually had to change schools. So I go to a new school, Miramar Elementary School, from Hallandale Elementary, and I walk into the classroom, and there isn't another girl in the room that looks like me.
Oh, wow.
So I was nervous, and I was a little apprehensive, if you can believe that. And my teacher walks, and she walks up behind me. She doesn't look like me either, and she says, "I don't want you to worry. You're going to have a great school year. I got you." And so the school year progressed, and then it was like, you know, when I grow up, talk about influence, I got to be like Miss Schaefer. So I go through school, and I meet a couple of other very influential teachers. Miss Robinson, who's now deceased, but she was my 8th grade language arts teacher. And then I had some amazing teachers. But the next one you want to talk about impact was in 11th grade. My 11th grade English teacher, I was an English teacher, was Lydia Ragone. And she was the kind of teacher who was truly from the school of hard knocks because she was building you for something better. And then I also had in my 12th grade year, my teacher, Richard 𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙑, who was my executive internship teacher, who really wanted us to understand life outside of the walls of a school. So I go to Florida State, and I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but I'm a proud Seminole.
So sorry.
Proud Seminole. And I got a full ride to major in education.
That's great.
And my high school principal, my senior year, he's now no longer with us. His name was Reuben Ranson. He said to me, "When you graduate, I have a job for you. So no matter where I am, you come find me." Wow. So in 1992, when I graduated from Florida State, I came home, and he was then the principal at Dillard High. So I began my career 32 years ago as a high school language arts teacher.
Wow.
That's so good. You know, I remember my third grade teacher, Mrs. Ludwig. She was the first teacher who ever gave me an outstanding in conduct. Oh. Because I was always getting like, Doug's too talkative. And she said to my mom, she said, you know, the reason I gave him an O is because I never catch him doing stuff, but there's always activity around him. So I finally tricked a teacher, my third grade teacher. I love Miss Ludwig.
Miss Ludwig. Sorry.
I know.
You got tricked, ma'am.
So we got to meet in 1999.
We did.
Wow.
So I was a teacher at something called the Matthew Project, an alternative education program. Right. You were an assistant principal at Whitten Rogers. So I remember being nervous because my first meeting with you was to resign as a teacher because I had this new job offer at Calvary Chapel to develop what is now 4 kids. But I'll never forget that conversation. So tell me your recollection of the conversation, and then I'll tell you mine.
So it may be the first time you remember meeting me, but I did come and do a couple of observations, but it was like our first deep conversation. And at that time, believe it or not, I was only 8 years into the job.
Oh, wow.
I was a teacher for 5 years. Okay. And then 27 of my 32 years have been at the leadership level.
Wow.
Yeah. So I go in, and he actually asked to see me. And I was like,
which is odd.
I was like, well, did I do something wrong? I hope everything's okay. And so I said, absolutely, we can meet. So I go over to, it was an off-campus site. I go over to meet with him, and he says to me, I have to talk to you about something. So I'm thinking, something happened with a student, something happened with the site administrator, and he says, I have to resign. And I was like, why? What, is everything okay? You don't like it here? You want to come to the main campus? And he said, no, I've accepted a full-time position in my call to the ministry. And I said, to do what? And he says, well, I'm going to be full-time in the youth ministry at my church. And I feel the call of God and I must respond. And I looked at him and I said, I am not going to argue with God.
And that's what I remember. I'm not going to argue with God. I'm
Wise woman.
Yeah, because I didn't know the depth of her faith. I only knew that she was, one of the administrators and leaders. So her response was kind of the affirmation for me. And she didn't even know that she understood that when God calls you, sometimes you just make difficult choices that don't make any sense. And so I'll never forget that conversation.
Wow. And thinking through like those moments of impact that you had throughout your years in school and now going into teaching, I'm sure you carried the realization like, okay, now I'm doing this for kids. Like what my 3rd grade teacher, my 6th grade teacher, my 11th grade English teacher, kids are now looking to me. So you've got that aspect. What was that like to walk in as a teacher?
So it was interesting when I first became a teacher. I was 21 years old. Some of my students were just 3 years younger than me.
Oh my goodness.
And it was interesting that they were looking to see first, like, who is she? What is she going to be about? And I had this this practice and this aura of I'm going to be firm, fair, consistent, but a little bit friendly. And I think those 4 elements I've carried throughout my journey. But I didn't realize the impact that I had on young lives until my students started to go away to college and I get the phone call. Can I talk through a problem with you? I have to decide between this class and this, major. Can I talk to this with you? But I think the greatest came when I became a principal. Well, you know what? I'll actually back up. When one of my students found himself on the wrong side of the law when I was a teacher, and he would call from the facility, and I would accept his call because he just needed to hear what he said would be a voice that would just listen. And when I got called to be a character witness, I was shocked. And the judge said to me, he said, we called you because of all of his teachers, you and one other were the only 2 that he had consistent attendance. So we want to know, what is it about you that, so that's when I started to realize, well, you know what? You do have influence as not only an educator, but as a person. And I think that's when it started to sink into me that as educators, unlike any other profession, we actually are responsible for shaping life itself. Not just the quality of life or producing goods and services to enhance, but the very lives themselves is what we are responsible for shaping and influencing. So,
yeah, I that's funny that you say that firm and consistent. That's exactly who I remembered it.
Don't forget the little bit friendly.
A little bit friendly.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit friendly. Yeah, so you transition from teaching kids and speaking of their life to now coaching and leading adults. How is that different?
So, actually, it's not too much different in the sense of your vocabulary has to shift a little bit. And I tell people, as a teacher, my focus was making a difference in the lives of kids. As an adult and as a leader, over 27 years of leadership, my purpose now is to make a difference in the lives of adults so that they can use that to impact the lives of children. But I find that I still have to be that same firm, fair, consistent, and a little bit friendly.
A little bit friendly.
And a little bit friendly. And I think what really convinces people when it comes to me is my little bit friendly. I get love and friendship at home. It's respect on the job. And people respect you through your consistent practice.
Well, so that's really good.
Yeah.
So one of the things I also admire about you is 32 years in the school system. I was a teacher. So you're dealing with, a lack of funding, sometimes overcrowded class. You're dealing with all these things.
Yeah.
And so it's easy in that environment to go, I had this idealistic view when I came in, and that's just been blown away. And now I just can complain. And sometimes the culture of a school or of an administration can just go to that lowest common denominator. Somehow you've been able to keep it up for yourself and for everyone around you. How do you do that?
I think I do it for two reasons. One, like you, I was called to do something.
Okay.
Right? And when you're called, you find that you've been equipped, whether you believe it or not when you're in the midst of it. And but I think for me, I have never taken my eye off of my why.
That's good.
My why from day one has been children. And through all of the challenges and the obstacles and the different, pieces of legislation and leadership, kids are still going to show up to a building. And parents are still going to expect us to give the very best that we have because they are delivering the very best that they have. Right? And I think that for me, that's my constant and it doesn't change. The funny part is days when it's like, oh, wow, am I still doing this? I literally get in my car, drive to the closest elementary school, and go sit on the floor with the kindergartners and just listen to life from their perspective.
Yeah, that's so good.
And I stay connected to kids.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I want to give you a little specific, tricky question.
Okay.
So put us in a moment where everyone around you is negative. All the teachers are negative. And how do you practically breathe air into that and elevate them? Because on your own, you go to the school and sit with the kids, but you can't do that with a dozen people who are frustrated. How do you as a leader bring up the temperature of the room toward hopeful optimism?
I'll tell you, and I've been through a number. I think obviously our community was rocked to our core when the tragedy at Marjory Stoneman Douglas occurred. And we will never forget those precious lives that we lost, the ones that are forever impacted. But I think for the sake of this question, I'll focus on the pandemic.
Okay.
Because the entire world came to a halt, right? Our community comes to a grinding halt when we have to close schools. And I think, as people were, you've got the mask mandates, you've got I don't want to go back to work. And for 1 second, I looked at the people around the table and I said, so I'm going to ask you a question. We know that schools are the lifeblood of the community. We know that thousands of children depend on us every day for the very basic resources in life. We have shuttered the places of shelter and safety that some of them, that's all they know. How do we not rise above adult problems to solve and address the needs of kids? And I think that that's what I keep going back to. Adult problems can't always trump the needs of kids. So how do we get through adult issues and get back to the needs of children?
That's why I would work for you. I like
Again?
that.
No.
Yeah, again.
Listen.
You never know.
Okay. All right. Well, I think too today, as you look at just like the rise of being able to go viral in a minute and like have your like instant fame and people kind of the getting rich quick is reinvented through online personas and all that's available. You see and hear about a lot of, young teachers entering education and exiting pretty quickly because of how difficult it is, whether they entered maybe pre-COVID and then had to go through that right away or going in post-COVID and it's a different world. How do you speak to, I love that you have such a strong why. How do you help young people find that or cultivate those values that you have so that they can have the longevity that really gives teachers like the power that they hold? Like some of my favorite teachers were the ones that had stuck around my school for 20, 30 years. My siblings had them and I couldn't wait to have them because of what great teachers I heard they were. But how do you help people find that as a leader in the school world?
One of the first things I always ask people, and why are you here?
Yeah.
What and so you'll get the, well, I like the calendar, or I mean, you'll get some of those responses, but then I get back to but why are you really here, right? And I will not sugarcoat. Teaching is a tough profession. Yeah. It is. It is a very tough profession. We are in different times with different societal values that sometimes challenge us to our core. So what I like to do, and I try to do often, is I try to find the moments where I necessarily can't pay them, because I'll never be able to pay anybody what they're worth, especially when they give their heart, because you can't put a price tag on that. But it's the moments of appreciation that when I see them in the community, or I'll just pop into a school, and it's hey, I'll come to your classroom. What's going on? How can we help? And I think that is the biggest part, is really just listening, and then helping them to make connections that will keep them encouraged and empowered. One of the things that we do, and I'm not sure if Pastor Doug is going to bring it up, but in COVID, we came up with this idea of maybe we should just pause and pray, because none of us have ever done this. Yeah. We're all afraid. So thanks to Pastor Doug and a number of his colleagues in the ministry, we started a Thursday prayer call for educators. Okay. And I think that what gives people a level of comfort or respect when it comes to me, I generally, and I typically, and I always, I check my title at the door. Right. And I am going through something with them instead of doing something to them. Right. And I think that helps people a lot when it comes to influence. And so I try to look for the moments to help them find why they say they are in the work to begin with.
Yeah, and I've been on many of those prayer calls, and it's interesting because John Lash, one of our local pastors, sort of leads it every week, and then guest pastors come, and you've got all these people on the prayer call. You got teachers and principals from all over, and they're just coming to pray and talk about needs and life, and Dr. Wanza is sort of in the background, and then she'll just sort of pipe in, just share a word of wisdom or a prayer request, and then she steps back out, and I love that about you. You don't have to be in the limelight. It's not like this is my title or I have to lead. So talk about what you've learned about leading from the second chair, or just being a quiet leader.
So interesting you say that. I read a book entitled that years ago, and it was called Leading Quietly. That sometimes the greatest influence comes from behind. It comes from the back, right? And I also noticed that when I was a principal, I noticed the influence and the impact that certain individuals on my campus had. They weren't the principal. They weren't the assistant principal. They weren't the department chair, but they were just those consistent people who you knew they were going to be there no matter what. So I'm the kind of person, I don't care who's right. I just want to do what's right. It doesn't have to have my name on it. And I tell people, my reward comes when I see the very people who they were high school seniors a few years ago, and now they're teachers. Now they're principals. Or, I walk in the doctor's office and I know you. And it's those kinds of things. Or the funniest one is, I was in the grocery store the other day, and this little girl who I'd never seen before, she says to Mom, it's the lady from TV. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so it's the, hi, what are you doing? Who are you kind of thing. But what I found is when you recognize that it's not about you, it's about the what and not the who. You don't have a problem where your seat is, because you're focused on the what, not the who.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And it sounds like throughout your experiences, both as a student and people speaking into your life, then as a teacher, and you being able to do it for others, this moment that you've had with Doug as well, like there's a weight you carry with your words. And it seems like you're very aware of that, and you choose when you're going to speak that. Is there a moment that you realized that the hard way, or have you always been like real cool, calm, and smooth?
So Actually, where I learned it the first time was when I was a teacher, and probably one time early in my central office days, that you don't always have to be the voice for everyone. Sometimes people need to find their own voice. And sometimes, people will use you to throw their stone so that they can hide their hand, right? And when you learn that early, you don't get burned often, right? And so I learned that as a young leader, that it's okay to advocate, but know who and what you're advocating for. Because a lot of times people want you to be their voice to throw a stone while they hide their hand.
That's good. Yeah, someone told me, this is probably 15 years ago, that as a leader, your words weigh 1,000 pounds. So there's like a weight to your words, and if you don't consider the weight of your words, you can do more damage than good. So you said, a couple times you felt that sense of regret, like someone used your words. Did you have to respond to that person, or you just learned the lesson internally? How did you respond to that?
So the first time I learned the lesson internally, I did. I learned the lesson. I was like, okay. And it's only happened twice. The second time I actually talked to the person.
Okay.
I did. I talked to the person and I said, listen, I can get in enough trouble by myself.
I believe that.
I can. I generally don't, but I can. And what I would appreciate is in the future, you need to be straight up, because I'm always going to be straight up and I'm always going to be transparent, because I have nothing to hide. I am truly one of those people. What you see is what you get. Right. And it was interesting because the receiver of the conversation said to me, I was going to ask you if you were feeling okay, because that was just not like you, something that you said. So I was able to course correct something, to your point, before it got completely out of hand. But over time, and thankfully, like I said, I learned it early, that not only are people listening to what you say, they're listening to how you say it. They're listening to how you say it. So I'm very measured. Typically, and I do a lot of thinking before I speak, to kind of, how's this going to be perceived, how's it going to be received, and then what may be the positive or the negative outcome.
So I know that a lot of your why comes from your deep Christian faith. So how do you integrate your Christian faith and your leadership in a public space? Like, what does that look like?
So obviously, I am very much aware of state statute and things of that nature. It is interesting, and I tell people, one of the leaders, I quote two people more than anyone in my work: my pastor and my mother.
Okay.
Right.
Look at that.
I do, and I think it's the balance of who I am is who I am. It just so happens that what I do gets to benefit from who I am. Right. And I can't hide the fact, neither will I hide that, yes, I am a person of deep faith. And that's what keeps me grounded, and also keeps me reminded that you're not here for you. And when this is over, you got to answer to somebody. So you better be very mindful of what you do and how you do it. But and I think that oftentimes, just the very words that I hear on Sunday or on a Thursday Bible study give me perspective for a Tuesday meeting or a Thursday conversation or a Friday, negotiation session. That those are the things that keep me grounded. And I don't have a problem that people know that I am a person of faith. I have no problem with that.
And so you've had opportunities to move up into different seasons and move out. So you were the superintendent of Broward Schools, you said, for 10 days as they waited for the next superintendent. So you're like the leader, you're the boss. I mean, that had to feel good in a moment, but you also had to step out of that. So tell me how you do that internally, stepping in and out of different leadership roles.
One of the things that I've learned to do very well over my life, and it's truly a gift from God, is I compartmentalize things very well. And I don't get ahead of myself. And I don't think that I'm any better than the next person. I don't think I'm any less than them either, but I don't think I'm any better than the next person. And so what I do is I really truly ask myself, so God, where are you putting me now? I don't need to know the why, but where are you putting me now? And I understand that wherever you're putting me, it's a part of your plan, and I'm good with it. So, and I tell people a lot of times, because they'll call and they'll say, "Oh, well, we thought you should have did this, or we thought you should have done that," and I say to them, "Y'all got to realize, our plan may not always be His will, and I'm just focusing on doing His will." So.
Yeah, no, a lot of people say that, but not a lot of people mean it.
No, I do. You know what? And
so I know you mean it when you say it.
And I've been blessed to be in multiple places, see multiple things, and I think it's just who I've been grounded in as a person. I don't, like I said, I don't get concerned about who's right. I just want to do what's right. So.
Yeah. So talk about your role now as a deputy superintendent. You probably got a lot of younger leaders around you. How do you intentionally, like that principal looked at you and said, "Hey, if you ever need a job, come to me." Do you ever look at someone and go, "They could do my job"? How do you speak that into them? How do you invest in them?
So I've had, if it's okay, I'll just kind of walk my leadership walk. Yeah. So I went from a classroom teacher, and then I did some work as a resource teacher in the professional orientation program, a beginning teacher program for a little bit. And then I became an assistant principal, a central office coordinator, a principal supervisor for 8 years. And then I was the chief school performance and accountability officer, where I literally had administrative responsibility for all 226 schools, 15 principal supervisors, and 7 support departments.
Oh my goodness.
Right. Then I was associate soup for a little while, where some of that responsibility was scaled back. Task assigned superintendent, task assigned chief of staff, and now permanent deputy superintendent, chief of staff. So over those 27 years, but particularly when I was an assistant principal, and there were teachers who were aspiring to be APs. I will say this, in all of those roles, I was able to tap in, to develop, to encourage, because I was never concerned about somebody taking my job. And I'm the kind of person that I believe that you truly have to develop the best in people, because the best in them brings out the best in you in that process. And I think, some people get so unnerved and they just get, no, I can't tell them everything I know. They're going to take my job. Honestly, if it's meant for you to have my job, it's because God has another job for me.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well,
but I've had the fortune to work on leadership teams and be a part of the development and the growth of hundreds. And I'm thankful for the opportunity that was provided for each one of them.
That's good. So one more follow-up question. So as you go from these different roles, sometimes you enter into like an ecosystem that's maybe healthy and the people are bonded, and then sometimes you step in and you're like, well, what is this? No one trusts each other and everything feels broken. So as a leader, what's the first thing you do when you step into a new environment? You're like, these people don't trust each other. They don't have a clear sense of purpose. How do I begin to get my hands around all that and influence the culture?
Right. So, and I've had that a couple
I'm
different
sure
times. I mean,
with that resume, I'm sure you've had it.
And I think the first thing that I always say is, okay, who are you and why are you here? That's me. And I always go through that with, who are you and why are you here? What's your value add, or what do you want your value add to be? Right? That's the first thing. And even when the culture is undesirable, I'm not just going to walk away, because again, I'm here for kids, and this little pocket is supposed to be for kids. So if you're truly for kids, who are you and why are you here again?
That's great.
So you get it.
Who are you and what? But I think the other part is, when people see the consistency in me, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for kids. And I treasure the opportunity to work through adults and work with adults on behalf of kids. Right. And I, you know, I've had some situations where we were able to lift, and some situations where I could lift to a point and then hand it off to someone else to do the next. And that's okay. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you can't always win the culture. You do the best you can, and trust God for what's the rest.
And I'm sure, like, with all of the influence that you bring to the space, there's that positive influence you're trying to bring into a culture, into a school, into a whole school system. There's also a lot of distractions and competing influences in the world of education. Some of them can be parents. Some of them can be outside things like a COVID or something like that. So how do you approach those moments when you're like, okay, there is clearly an outside influence that's creeping into the work that we've done or to the core of the why that we're here? How are you taking that influence back?
So I a person, as I said, of great faith, and I have conversations with God regularly. And I'll say things like, okay, God, this is a funny. All right. this is a funny. But what I do in those times is I actually don't run from problems. I face them head on. And I don't run from people. I face them head on in a very firm, fair, friendly, consistent way. Consistent way. But I think that the first thing that I truly do is try to analyze and truly understand where I am and what is the issue that has to be resolved. And I think understanding that, then I start to process, how did we get here? And that starts to then formulate, how did we get here? Okay, now this is how we get out of here.
Yeah.
If we truly want to get out.
Yeah.
And sometimes I find that, you know, people truly want to get out, and some people don't want to get out. They're just there for the confusion. And they're just there for, you know, the chaos, and that's what feeds them. Yeah. And I just don't, you know, I'm not going to subscribe to that. I'm going to allow them to have their moment, but then we got to come out of this.
Right.
And how are we going to do it?
Yeah. And I mean, because you are so connected to the why, obviously you realize that those people that are desiring the chaos and thriving in it, that's at the detriment of students and the future of the kids that are at that school. So it's just beautiful, honestly, to see the full, like, send you have on your why and your commitment. It really makes me, like, so hopeful just for whatever Broward schools, like, will continue to become, knowing that there is someone like you that is leading and guiding. And I think about teachers today, like, if there's young teachers that are either, you know, just entering, or maybe they're watching and they're, you know, a person of faith and they're struggling. What does the reality in education today, what does mentorship look like? Like, is that a reality for teachers? Is there that possibility? How do people that are teaching gain what they need in support, so that they can continue to be the influence I think that they really want to be for students?
So we do have formal, if you will, district-sponsored, district-supported, district-led mentor programs for new teachers. And also not just new teachers, but teachers who may have transitioned from different roles, you know, if they want it, and even teachers who I've been teaching for 10 years in another state.
Oh, okay.
And I'm new to Broward County, and they get like a buddy and a mentor to kind of help guide them through those first years or two. We also have them as people want to move through the career progression. We have that. But I think that it's more of the informal relationships that are formed that actually become the support ecosystem that teachers and aspiring leaders, parents, community members, that they need to help navigate them through whatever is their desired path. And then we also have a lot of mentorship programs for students.
Okay.
Because our students find themselves in places, I laugh and I tell people all the time, we didn't have social media when I was in high school.
Right.
We didn't have the internet when I was in high school. We didn't have the internet when I was a teacher. And so and what people have to, fend or compete with today is totally different than what we had to compete with. So it's important that we have those support systems to help them in their journey.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want you to think forward. Let's say you have 5, 10, 15, however many more years you're going to work, to leave like your leadership legacy over the school system.
Okay.
Like, what does that look like for the future? What are you dreaming about?
So, interesting. I was at a homegoing service for an assistant pastor in Pompano, and the senior pastor, who's not my senior pastor, but the senior pastor said, inheritance is something you leave to people, but legacy is something you leave in people.
That's so good.
And so I've been thinking about that because obviously I'm at year 32, and I only have X amount left. I won't say what the X is because then people start to try to,
you'll be in the paper again.
Right, I'll be in the paper again. And so the question becomes when there's this look back over the 30, how many ever years, or 40, whatever the number will be, that she has invested, is the system better because she passed this way? And I think that when I look at a lot of the leaders in place, when I look at some of the initiatives and some of the moments in time that we've overcome, that's just what I want people to say. The system is better because she passed this way.
Well, I think the system's certainly better because you passed this way. And so, honored to be in the same city and serve the same people and the same kids. And just grateful for your leadership.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think to just know that you are someone who is a strong believer and you lead through that quietly. There is a beauty in knowing that you're trusting God with every direction and decision, and that you are influencing, our education system in so many ways. It's just really cool to think that part of your legacy is that you've been a leader who is, when you can, been grounded in your faith and helping others get there through something like a prayer call. And I really hope that continues with leaders coming up, that they'll take that from you and be those leaders in the back that will chime in, but be grounded quietly and firmly. I know it's kind of close to what Doug asked, but I want to ask every guest this season, just in the next couple of years, as people encounter you and you influence them however you do, what is that influence you hope instantly they're to do, to be, to say? What are you hoping?
So I'm hoping, and I say this all the time to particularly young people. I say all the time, I want them to see that whoever they are and whoever they hope to be, it depends on them. Whoever they are and they hope to be. A lot of times, and I'm sure you both get this, you get invited to go somewhere and they read this bio that's about half the length of your arm, and you're saying to yourself, they're reading all of that. And then, people start with the ooh and the ah and the oh. And I always say to them, listen, I don't want you to be impressed or intimidated by anything you heard. Just like you, I'm this ordinary kid from Broward County who's been abundantly blessed by an awesome God that qualifies the unqualified. So what is it that you want to be? It's up to you, and how can I help you get there?
That's really good.
That's amazing. And I think that you are doing that for people. So just really grateful. Thank you for your time. Knowing what your job is and I can't believe
knowing what you're going through today. The fact that you're here is amazing.
So grateful. There's probably never a dull moment in the life of education. So I'm just really grateful that you're here. And we hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Wanza. And hopefully you just feel encouraged by the strength that she has inside of her. And hopefully it has inspired you to know your why and the power that you have to influence others. So again, Dr. Wanza, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. And we'll see you all soon.
See you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Seasons Podcast. Our hosts are Pastor 𝘼𝙑𝙑 and 𝘾𝙯𝙀𝙀. Seasons is produced by Calvary Chapel Fort Lauderdale, and our theme song is Seasons by Connor Henderson with Calvary Music. For more information about our church or this podcast, visit calvaryftl.org.